Good to go?
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everybody. My name is Matt Haggman, Miami Program Director at Knight Foundation. We at Knight Foundation are huge supporters of the Miami Book Fair. Big fans, too. And ahead of the book fair, which is rapidly approaching, we're taking some time to talk with authors and to spend some time sort of learning what inspired the book and give some teasers ahead of what will be some terrific talks. And today, we're with John David. John wrote the book, How to Protect or Destroy Your Reputation Online. Certainly, so many of us, our lives are now shared physically, visiting like this, but of course, more and more virtually through online, through social media, and all the rest. So certainly a book I think many will find very, very useful. But John, I wanted to start with you, just to understand what prompted you to sit down and to write this book.
Thanks so much for having me here. It's really great, and this is speaking online, being broadcast online. We're part of the new world order. This is the newest, hottest thing, and we're moving in that direction. It's changing rapidly. The media landscape's changing rapidly. You guys here at the Knight Foundation, you know as much about that as anyone. And what happened for me, and I've been in the public relations business for 25 years, and I had a fairly specific moment in time where I got a phone call from my brother, who's an attorney, and one of his clients was basically under attack, an online attack by what I would call a rogue blogger.
Really? This is someone blogging about your brother's client?
About the client. He was actually attacking a whole industry. And the client...
This is through blogging, social media too?
Yes, it was mainly through a blog.
Yeah.
And I was on vacation, and I got hired while I was on vacation, and I started working on this project with the lawyers, and we were able to kind of deflect this blogger and kind of push him off the case a little bit. That's a whole nother tale. But what happened was like sometimes happens when you're on vacation. You spend a few days decompressing, and then you start thinking about everything else that's going on in your life, and you start to think bigger about your business sometimes. And I started thinking about this and thinking, we all know it. Anybody can say whatever they want online. Sometimes with impunity, and it can be incredibly unfair. Right? I mean, you can say whatever you want. Sometimes you don't even, you do these things anonymously. And so I started, sketching out, back of a napkin business plan. Here's what I'll do. Here's how I'll do some consulting on this. And I came back to Miami, and I started to do a little bit of work in this regard. And I would speak to a lot of professional people, and I would ask them about, online issues. And I'd tell them the stories that I'd heard so far. And almost every professional person I talked to had a story.
Really?
It was something. It was their kid got in trouble. The friend of a friend got in trouble. Their business got ripped online with reviews. All these different things happening. And the more I learned, the more interested I got. And then I started. I have a pretty active blog. And if you're a blogger, there's one key thing about blogging is that you never have enough ideas.
Right. And by the way,
you're always struggling to come up with something new.
Right. And at this point, though, you didn't have sort of a resource that you were turning to inform your own thinking.
Not at all. Not at all, because there really wasn't anything.
Yeah.
I mean, there was just...
What's the time frame when this happened?
This was 3 years ago. 3 years ago. And so I started writing blog posts about this, and every time I learned something new, I had to feed the blog a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then... And eventually I had a whole bunch of interesting things, and I got invited to go speak at a local school, and I was kind of cobbling all that together, and I'm like, I could talk about this online reputation stuff, and I'm like, you know what, I could write a book about this.
Sure. And
then of course that was just a wild idea,
And sat down.
And then I sat down and I started pounding it out, and I kind of lined everything up, and then one thing led to another, and I took a good idea, and I turned it into a book proposal, and I got a literary agent, and I got a publisher, and bam.
Here we are. Here right now, you'll be speaking at the book fair shortly.
And here I am, here I am at the Miami Book Fair International, which I used to, which I patronize. It's just it's a sort of an amazing a year and a half ago, you told me I was sitting here, I would have been.
You started the writing process about a year and a half ago.
I started in earnest probably last summer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. What a neat journey.
Yeah, it's been very interesting.
So just as a though, your message, and I'm assuming this, we didn't talk about this beforehand, but you do think people should be online, should be present. I mean, because I imagine, for example, your brother's client, there might be some people who are like, look, I don't want to have an online presence at all. Is your thought, though, that, look, this presents, and we'll talk about the pitfalls, but going the other way for a second, this presents real opportunities, and you should be thinking about ways to be online. Is that
without question, without question. The reality is, and there's part of my book where I talk about this, is that you don't get to be off the grid.
Yeah,
you may think you can, and you may get, and you probably heard plenty of people who say, "Oh, I'm not on social media. I don't do Twitter. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not interested in any of that stuff." And there's some logic to that when you think about it. There's a lot of famous online gaffes.
Yeah.
And
we could make one.
We could
here,
do it
right here.
We could do it right now. We could start talking about several different topics and off the rails. But the logic on that side is that if I'm not on Twitter, I can't write something offensive on Twitter, right? If I'm not on there, I can't do it, and that makes a certain amount of sense. But what I've seen more often than not are cases of individuals who had that philosophy. So they were not on social media. They didn't have an online presence. They were trying to just be, sit back and be, outside the online universe. And then something happened.
Yeah.
And so they had to deal with some type of crisis, which was online. And then that's the only thing that's online.
Yeah.
And so you need to have a Twitter account. You need to have a Facebook account. You need to be on LinkedIn. If you run a business, you have to be looking at online review sites. You have to engage in online review sites. You have to you have to play in the online universe, because if you don't, then you're basically turning your life over to Google.
Sure.
You're throwing your life into Google's hands. So, and guess what? You could not, Matt, you could not have a Twitter account, which I know you have. You could not be on LinkedIn. You could avoid all this stuff, and you could do everything you possibly could to not be online, but there will still be stuff about you online.
Sure.
Because if you own a home, there's a record of it. If you've made a political contribution, there's a record of it. All that stuff, it's all out. There's stuff out there. And now, if you may not want the world to know, if you contributed to a political campaign, for business reasons, perhaps because of the job you have.
But it's out there.
But it's out there.
Yeah.
So, what do you want people to find when they're looking for you? And what I tell people is this: most of the time, when someone's trying to get information about you online, they're looking for something really simple. What's your phone number? What's the address to this place so I go to the right place for my interview?
Mm-hmm.
What's the, what are the store hours so I can, buy this on my way home or not? Do I have to go on Saturday because it's not open? Is it open on Saturday? Do they have takeout? All those simple things.
Sure.
All those simple things. Now, if you go online and you can't find the simple information, what are you going to do? Well, number one, if it's a business and you can't find their phone number, then they're not going to get patronized. Number one. But number two, you're going to dig deeper. You're going to look further into it, and you're going to say, okay. And then they may go to page 3 or 4 or 5 of your search results, and then they're going to see that wild night you had in college, which you're not proud of.
Right.
So you have to have, I call it your reputational firewall. You have to build up your online profile, because if not, you're just it's chaos.
And that's being proactive. So like when a client reaches out to you, I'm guessing there's never a time now where you'll say you don't want a social media presence or you don't want it online. Is that, or are there
I think that there are, that there's some really small, narrow, a friend of my family who's a wealthy guy who's in his late 60s and he's almost impossible to find. You know? And he likes it that way.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. But I warned him. I said, listen, if something goes wrong, that's the only thing people are going to see when they just type your name in the search engine. So you have to realize that that's a possibility.
So with it understood that the recommendation is really to establish that that presence online
Yep.
in your identity and being strongly out there on different social channels, blogging, certainly something
Yes.
that you advocate in
Absolutely.
and your professional life and public relations. Let's talk about playing defense or what
Sure.
to do, right?
Sure.
So, what are some of the real sort of horror stories that you've come across? And to add to that, I mean, are there some? Why don't we start with horror stories, but then also, what are some sort of common ones that come up a lot?
Okay. Well, the first thing is that they're very common because what we've learned is that everyone will be Googled, and starting at a young age.
Yeah.
So when I first wrote the book, I really thought that like one of my audiences was going to be college students.
Sure.
College students
All those party
famously
pictures
do,
and all
lots
that,
of red
right?
solo
Yeah.
cups and all that good stuff. And but what I've realized is that it's your online life starts to get formed before you go to college. And it's some numbers. I have the numbers in my book. It's 40% or something of college recruiters look at search results of their applicants, and half of them are looking at social media.
Isn't that amazing? That's part of the evaluation.
They're looking at
your
and they're looking now. Now the thing is, so now we automatically think, oh, they're looking for something negative. But there are also, in many instances, college recruiters go online and they look at an applicant's social media profile, and they see, oh, wait a second, he was involved in this organization or she was involved in that organization, and this isn't on our application. And they've actually find good things about them, right? But then they also find the bad stuff. They find the inappropriate language. A big one is inappropriate screen names, and just all these photographs and videos and offensive language, and just imagine, right? Yeah. And then the next step up is that once you're in school and it's time for you to go find your job, recruiters are looking at that stuff even harder, and they're looking at your social media feeds, and they're looking. There was a statistic that I saw said 20% of recruiters for businesses, employers, they're looking for reasons not to hire you. Like they've said it. 20% of the time, we're searching these profiles and we're looking for reasons.
And now online, there's this whole treasure trove of
and
things.
There's all this, right.
So
there's that, and then of course, once you get out of school and once you're working and you're running a business, then you know that 90% of people who shop online look at reviews. So in some regard, they take a look at reviews. Now, they look at reviews for everything? No, but where you're being checked out, every business is being checked out online. So you're being researched all the way along. So here's a good story we'll talk about. I'll tell you the tale, and then given your journalism background, we'll have a really good argument / discussion about it. So, young man called me up, and we'll say his name is Justin. Names are changed to protect the whatever.
Sure.
And so he went to school in California, and he worked at the box office at the university box office. And he was working his way through school, right? Very admirable thing to do in life, and he, the lady who ran the box office, who was an employee of the university, unexpectedly passed away. And the university did an audit, and they found that there was money missing from some of the accounts of the box office. And so they questioned Justin, okay? Mm-hmm. And he cooperated with the police, and he actually turned over his laptop to them, and they investigated him, and they completely cleared him of any wrongdoing. But meanwhile, a couple of students at the student newspaper found out about this embezzlement, and they were on the story like a dog on a bone, mm-hmm. and they wrote a piece for the student newspaper, and they named Justin's full name that he was questioned by police. So now they were super proud of it. The story they wrote, Justin was happy not to have any issues with the police, right? And then a couple years later, he's out trying to get a job, and he can't even get an interview. Wow. Because whenever someone Googles his name, they see a story about embezzlement. Yeah. Now, here's the question. So, what do you do about that, right? And do you go back to the newspaper and say, yeah, he was questioned, but he was cleared.
Yeah.
Now, but if they write clarification, on page 2B, is that going to outperform the
right? Does that just amplify?
And make it worse?
Yeah.
Now, you're as a former journalist, you probably still has a lot of that credo in your head. What do you do if you're the newspaper? What's your solution for that?
Well, I can remember when I was a reporter when there have been stories like that, stories around an allegation and someone's named, and them coming back and saying, I would like that completely removed from the archive. So experienced that when I was a reporter at the Miami Herald.
And what did they do?
Same thing. In that case, it stayed.
Of course,
it stayed.
That's right.
It was not taken down.
Right.
So what then?
So what do you?
That's where you come in.
So what do you do?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So there's some different things that you can do. I would advocate a middle ground where I would say to the newspaper, and I'm not sure if the newspaper would agree with me on this or not, but I would say keep the story in your archive, keep it on your website, but de-index it from search results, or remove or untag him from the story in some way. But I have friends of mine who are in public relations, used to be journalists, who say, no, we can't do that. We're First Amendment, and it was right at the time, and all that stuff. So we're in a sort of weird, precarious time with things like this. So the solutions, sometimes the solutions aren't that, you can't really find those solutions. They're not really, there's no good solution. And but there are things that you can do. There's different things you do when you have a problem online. The first thing is what I call the beg and the plead tactic, and that's where you go to
that works in a lot of different contexts.
So it depends what it is. So if you have a story and it's the negative story that's in the New York Times, well, you can beg and plead all you want, but you're not going to get anywhere. But if it's on a message board that's controlled by a corporation, that's a real corporation, and you go to them and say, listen, there's this post on your message board, and it's inflammatory, and we think it's inappropriate. We think you should take it down. A lot of times they'll take it down. You can go to if you find the right person, you find a person who understands. If all the circumstances have to be kind of aligned, but you can ask to get things removed from the internet, from websites and things like that. If you ask the right person.
So if it's not a newspaper.
Blog sites. But if it's an independent blog site and it's dealing with someone who's kind of maybe a little bit radical, again, you're dealing with a whole other equation. So there's a book's worth of scenarios for this.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that you can ask for a page to be de-indexed from search results, and that's where it's still online, but it's just not being viewed by Google or Bing or whoever. That's another solution. It's sort of in the beg and the plead category. The other area that's well known is called suppression. That's where you try to push down or bury the negative content.
So how would you go about doing that?
So what happens there is if there's a negative story, what you try to do is kind of flood the internet with positive information. So if it's about you, we flood the information with positive content, benign content about Matt Haggman, and we want to push that story that shows you doing whatever crazy thing you did in college to page 3.
To page 3. And the hope is that some of that is already happening, right? Because there is the thought of being proactive with your online presence.
Right. Right. So if somebody came out, wrote a blog post, and said something negative about you, and you have a pretty strong online profile given your position and the fact that you participate in social media and your background and all that, it may not rise high up in results. The problem with the suppression strategy is that the negative information is still online.
Sure.
So if you're applying to college or applying for a job, or you're hoping to be the CEO of whatever, they're going to look. People are going to look. They're going to look deep. They're going to look deep into your background. They're not going to stop at page 2 and say, "Oh yeah, he's perfect. We should make him our CFO." It's not going to happen. So the suppression strategy. The problem with that is that you're really trying to game the system. You're trying to outsmart Google, and I think that's a tall order.
That's a tough one.
The guys at Google are really smart. One of the largest corporations in the world. Really intense. They recruit the best people, and their goal is to have the best, most accurate results.
Yeah.
And so when you're trying to game their system, they're not going to respond too kindly to that. So and that's happened. They've reworked their algorithms and all those things, and so the suppression strategy works less effectively than it did, say, a couple of years ago. And the other thing that you can do is something that I call the covert ops of online reputation management. And there's some folks who figured out, how content, gets online and stays online. And what happens is that every piece of online content that goes on the internet has to abide by lots of different rules and regulations. So if you're on your phone and you type in post something to Twitter, it's instantly online. But you actually, that piece of information goes through dozens of what I call conduits, like AT&T has conduits and Verizon has conduits, and GoDaddy and Network Solutions and Google, all these things. And they have terms and conditions that every piece of content has to abide by. Now, if they analyzed every tweet against their terms and conditions, there'd be no Twitter, there'd be no online content because that's not how it works.
Yeah.
But like I said, there's some folks who figured out how to analyze internet content against the thousands of terms and conditions and look for ways to assess that negative content and look for ways to get it taken down.
Wow, that sounds like pretty sophisticated stuff. Maybe for a corporate client.
It's a bit expensive and it's a bit unique and it's a sort of for special situations.
But it's been done.
Absolutely.
And seen stuff just removed.
Absolutely, yeah. I've seen things disappear.
So that's
pretty amazing.
That's those are examples of playing defense. Bad stuff is out there. What you do to try and mitigate, or in some cases even remove it.
Right. Absolutely.
So what about just for people who are either sort of who are now just beginning to engage more online or are online, very active, but have not yet had one of these sort of horror stories, have not had their name attached to something where they're not guilty of it, but it's there and it's living on forever. What are some of the basic things you think that people should be sort of have front of mind as they think about sort of being online? The bad stuff hasn't happened yet, but you want to be smart.
Right. I mean, I think the biggest thing for everyone is we have to start and just, we have to stop and think before we post.
Mm-hmm. So number one is don't post.
To have a good, first thing is the best way to have a good online reputation is to have a good offline reputation.
Sure.
And that's, follow the rules of the road, everything you learned in kindergarten, all those things, the way you should behave and treat your fellow man. Yeah. I think that's
authenticity,
the rule.
Being genuine, having integrity, that comes across online just as it does sitting in a
I think so. I mean, not always. I mean, because how authentic can you be, or how true to yourself can you be in 140 characters? It's a challenge. But I think that the first thing is kind of make sure you try to follow life's rules. The next one is that you have to really kind of resist this urge to digitally document everything that happens in your life. Everything that you do does not deserve to be on Twitter.
Yeah.
I mean, you may think you're that interesting, but you're probably not. And it doesn't. And the other part of this is that we really have to resist, the urge to document the failings of others. When you have, we all have bad days. Whether it's with your kids or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your coworker or whatever, or you're in line at the grocery store and you're rushed and you're frustrated, or somebody lost your keys or whatever happens, right? And we all lose our mind every once in a while, and guess what? It doesn't deserve to be online.
Yeah.
And so we can't be sitting there at the ready with our phones, when somebody melts, we see that guy melting down at the at the post office and want to throw that up online immediately. It doesn't
the real consequences for that person.
Absolutely. So we have to sort of look at our fellow man like that.
So number one, us being very mindful of what we're putting out there. Really
absolutely.
Understand this is going to live on. Secondly, us being mindful of what we're putting out about others.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Without question.
Yeah.
And then and then there's just we really have to sort of resist these crazy things that are going on. We're just hearing about people who are posting pictures of their private parts and sexting and doing all this wacky behavior.
You're taking on a huge risk when you do that, because that's stuff that can live on and be found. Right?
The thing is that for whatever reason we've got the other thing when it comes to young people, I find that we really have to I have teenagers, so we all know that, the teenagers are the smartest people in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
They'll tell you right in front of your face how smart they are, but they just don't have life experiences, and they don't understand, and they don't see the consequence because they haven't been on the planet long enough. And we have to teach them about those things, and they have to learn that there's these things have a long have a long life, and you have to be responsible in what you post and what you say and how you say it. So.
Now, if when I worked at the Herald before coming over to the Knight Foundation, we used to have comments underneath
Right.
articles,
Right.
And you could do it anonymously. You could
Right.
just have any old names,
Right.
and it was unbelievable the comments that people felt they sort of had the license to make.
Right.
Language like you'd never
Sure.
seen.
Oh, sure.
And
Sure.
and it actually resulted in a discussion. I mean, should we be a forum allowing for people,
Right.
to say these sorts of things? And actually, there began to be a curation of it. And I think I'm no longer at the Miami Herald, but ultimately
Right.
there was some real courage to it,
Yeah.
just because it just became a place of just almost unspeakable commentary.
Yeah, lots of vitriol, right? It's
That's
really
the best way to
lots of
describe
people. It's very easy. I used to, as a public relations person, and I remember when the stories would come out, and my clients would call me, and they'd say, "Well, what do you think about that comment?" And I would say, "You need to ignore that."
And that's what you just ignore.
At that time, I mean, I think that those comments, they don't get a lot of online traction, I think, but I just there's one thing about the online world that you have to remember, and I learned. I was talking to one guy who I interviewed for my book, and he was talking about online reviews, and he said, listen, whenever we get a negative review, we go into 5-alarm mode, and we want to fix it and everything else. He goes, except for one situation, when the person's crazy, because you can't fix crazy.
Right.
And there's a lot of craziness online. There's a lot of people out there who are, the moment that story posts on MiamiHerald.com at 3:37 in the morning, they're commenting on it, and they're whatever it is, the mayoral race or whatever it is. And you just have to, sometimes some things online, you just have to look at them and realize this is not coming from someone who I should be listening to.
Yeah.
The problem is if that kind of bit of craziness somehow gets amplified and becomes louder online, and then you have to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, what about comments on Yelp or something? When we see in this case, say you have a business of some kind,
Right.
and this we think a comment under a story is obviously that can be a really bad thing.
Right.
But that's sort of one thing. To your point, I mean, oftentimes the thought was just sort of let it go. But on a site that's sort of getting into where where a business is being rated,
Right.
And then consumers are freely commenting on it.
Right.
When in that context, often, I mean, I know when I'm looking on a site, I'll read through some quick reviews.
Right.
And the first couple I'll see, those will often resonate one way or the other.
Right.
It may not
Right.
ultimately direct my what I choose to do, but they
Sure,
stick in my head. And certainly,
absolutely.
if there's a negative one, I go,
Right.
Talk a little bit about that.
Sure, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
first thing is online reviews are here to stay.
Yeah. They're not
Okay.
going away.
Yelp is a publicly traded company. TripAdvisor is a publicly traded company. Glassdoor is another one that a lot of people are learning about, that where employees rate their companies. That's a venture-funded company. I'm assuming someday they want to be a publicly traded company. And they're big businesses, okay? And so they're getting bigger, and you have to pay attention to them. The rules for a site like Yelp or TripAdvisor is the companies themselves promote engagement of and so if you have a business, you should be engaged on Yelp. You should be an engaged employer on TripAdvisor if you have a hotel or whatever. And the reason is that there's many reasons, but the first one is that you'll get notified when someone reviews you. So let's say you have a restaurant, and someone goes on to Yelp and they write a 5-star review for you. They'll notify you of that, and then the best practice is that you should respond to that review, the good one, and say, thank you so much for coming.
Mm-hmm.
Please, come. Please ask for me next time you come. I'd love to shake your hand, whatever.
Again, to the point of being proactive first.
Proactive.
Yeah.
But then the other thing is that you may get that review that's the negative one, and it's very important that you engage with the negative one as well. Again, assuming it's not a crazy person. So, and if I always give this analogy. So if your kid comes home from school with a report card and they got 5 A's and a C, which one are you going to ask them about? You're going to ask them about the C. Why do you have a C in my case, handwriting, right? Why do you have a C in art? Why do you have a C in calculus, whatever? So when you go on Yelp or you go on one of these review sites and you see 10 reviews that are all 5s and you see one review that's a 3 or a 2, what are you going to do? You're going to go look at that one. Now, that review says, I went to this restaurant, the soup was cold, the music was loud, and the service was awful. And you're going to say, wait, I'm not sure if I want to go. I want to go have a quiet night, night out with my wife or whatever. But then you read the rest of the review and you realize that the owner has responded. And the owner replies back, I'm sorry you didn't have a good experience. As you know, when I talked to you before that we were sound checking the band and I apologized and I comped your soup and, please come back another time and I promise you we'll make it right. Now, you read that. Are you more likely to go to that restaurant or not? And the answer is you are, because you realize you have an engaged owner who cares about their reputation, who cares about their business, and so you want to, and that's one situation where you definitely want to be an engaged person online.
I know for myself when it wasn't an online review, but it was on Twitter and with an airline where a flight had been just outright canceled and we hadn't been. And I couldn't help myself, and got out my phone and complained about the poor service on the airline. And what really did help was that someone from the company, they obviously the team there monitoring their Twitter account, and quickly wrote back. In fact, responded faster than I think if I'd called an 800 number and to get through all the prompts to actually talk to someone.
Absolutely,
responded faster via, in this case, Twitter.
So next time you're online, paying a bill, for example. Look at, for example, you have a credit card from Citibank. You'll actually see on the Citibank website that, reach out to us on Twitter. They actually ask you to do that. Twitter actually has a whole business back end where they're actually doing that. They want you to use their customer service through Twitter. So I've done it myself. We were, my wife was shopping for health insurance, and there was some glitch with the health insurance company, and she was on hold for, 2 hours or something like that.
Yeah.
And so, she called me up frustrated, and I sent a tweet to the CEO of the insurance company, and, an hour later it was fixed.
Wow.
So
that's an interesting point that this case I mentioned, I was complaining.
Right.
But there's another thought of maybe not just complain, but ask for a response and use social media to do that.
Sure. You can actually go online and say something complimentary.
Right.
But,
who
knows if that's going to happen?
Yeah,
not about you. I'm just saying in general.
No, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, so with that, John, you will be at the Miami Book Fair. You're going to be Authors Row on
Saturday the 19th.
Saturday the 19th. And then on the 20th.
On the 20th at 10 a.m., I will be presenting my book and giving a talk about online reputation issues. So
terrific.
Great to see you there.
Well, the book is How to Protect or Destroy Your Reputation Online by John P. David. John, thanks very much.
Thank you so much. It was great. Thank you.